Look at this scene. 1917. The world is at war. Russia is starving. And the people finally rise up, toppling a dynasty that had ruled for 300 years. This was supposed to be the birth of a new world, a utopia for the common man. The promise of the Russian Revolution was simple and powerful: peace, land, and bread. A society where the workers and peasants, the Soviets, held all the power. But what if I told you this glorious promise was nothing more than a carefully crafted lie? This is the story of how the very men who preached universal liberation became the century's most effective tyrants. This is the Bolshevik Betrayal, the story of a revolution that died the moment its leaders seized power. By the early 20th century, Russia was a pressure cooker waiting to explode. The vast majority of the population, the peasants, lived in abject poverty, while a tiny elite, the nobility and the Tsarist regime, enjoyed immense wealth. The 1905 revolution, sparked by the infamous Bloody Sunday massacre, was the first warning shot. But the Tsar's concessions were just a facade. The core issues of poverty and political repression remained, simmering just beneath the surface. Then came World War I in 1914. For Russia, it was an economic death sentence. The war effort placed an unbearable strain on an already collapsing economy, leading to mass food shortages and widespread discontent. Tsar Nicholas II made a fatal mistake. In 1915, he took personal command of the army. His absence created a power vacuum in the capital, which was filled by the deeply unpopular Tsarina Alexandra and her controversial advisor, Grigory Rasputin. Their chaotic influence destabilized the government, and Rasputin's own assassination in 1916 only highlighted the deepening crisis. The final snap came in February 1917. It began with strikes and demonstrations in Petrograd over bread shortages. It wasn't an organized revolution. It was the spontaneous rage of a starving people. When the Tsar ordered the Duma, Russia's parliament, dissolved, the order was ignored. Then came the true tipping point. Soldiers in the Petrograd garrison mutinied, refusing to fire on the protesters. The military, the final pillar of the throne, had abandoned the Tsar. On March 2nd, Nicholas II was forced to abdicate. The Romanov dynasty was over. In the vacuum, a provisional government was established. It was composed of liberal and moderate socialist leaders who promised civil liberties and, most importantly, elections for a Constituent Assembly that would write a new democratic constitution. But they made one fatal error. Led by figures like Alexander Kerensky, they decided to keep Russia in World War I. This decision sealed their fate. The war-weary, starving population demanded peace. The landless peasants demanded farms. The workers demanded control. The moderates failed to deliver anything. This failure was the perfect incubator for the radicals. And that's when Vladimir Lenin arrives. Smuggled back into Russia by the Germans who hoped he would cause chaos, Lenin stepped off a train in Petrograd in April 1917 and immediately called for an end to the war and the overthrow of the Provisional government. The Bolshevik platform was a political masterpiece of propaganda. Peace, land, and bread, and all power to the Soviets. It was simple, direct, and promised everything the people desperately wanted. This was a clear path to mass popular support, a promise of direct action when the moderates only offered more delay. The Bolsheviks knew the provisional government was weak, and they had no intention of waiting for democracy. The October Revolution began with Bolshevik forces seizing key locations in Petrograd: the post office, the train stations, the bridges. It culminated on October 25th with the storming of the Winter Palace. It's often depicted as a heroic mass uprising, but in reality it was a strategically executed, relatively bloodless coup. Power was swiftly transferred to the Council of People's Commissars, with Lenin at its head. They immediately issued the Decree on Land and the Decree on Peace. The promises were delivered, or so it seemed. The true, undeniable betrayal of the revolution happened just a few months later, in January 1918. The Bolsheviks, having secured power by force, had to face the results of the democratically elected Constituent Assembly, the very body that was supposed to create a new democratic Russia. The problem? They lost the election, and they lost it badly to other socialist parties. Faced with a democratic defeat, Lenin's choice revealed his true intentions. Did the Bolsheviks respect the will of the people? No. They simply dissolved the entire assembly at gunpoint. One delegate who protested was told to go home. The promise of all power to the Soviets was a lie. The Bolsheviks weren't interested in democracy. They were interested in absolute, unchallenged power. To solidify this betrayal, they established the Cheka, their dreaded secret police force. What followed became known as the Red Terror. It was a deliberate, brutal campaign of mass execution and repression against anyone perceived as an enemy of the revolution. Monarchists, liberals, and even rival socialists who had once been their comrades. The goal wasn't justice. It was to rule through fear. The Bolsheviks, now commanding the Red Army, had to defend their new authoritarian state during the bloody Russian Civil War from 1918 to 1922 against a loose coalition of anti-Bolshevik forces known as the Whites. The Red Army's victory in 1922 did not bring peace. It cemented the power of a single party that ruled through violence. The dream of all power to the Soviets was dead. The Soviets, the workers' councils, became mere rubber stamps for the Communist Party. The final, crushing irony, the Tsar's secret police and political repression, which had been so hated, were replaced by a far more ruthless, efficient, and widespread system of control. The very peasants who celebrated the decree on land, which promised them their own farms, were later brutalized and starved by the millions under Stalin's forced collectivization. The man who took over from Lenin sealed the ultimate betrayal of the revolution's core promises. The Bolshevik Revolution was a monumental event. It redrew the map of the 20th century, but it also stands as a powerful, tragic historical lesson. Any revolution that sacrifices freedom and democracy for the sake of power is destined to betray the very people it claims to liberate. The legacy of 1917 shows the immense challenge of implementing revolutionary ideals and the inevitable tragedy that occurs when utopian dreams collide with the raw human lust for absolute power. So, was the failure of the Russian Revolution inevitable once the chaos began, or could a true democracy have emerged from the ashes of the Tsarist regime? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more historical analysis that cuts through the myths, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.